From NFL trades to the biggest weekend of college football, some say might have ever happened this season. But hey, we got that to break down, plus the NBA season starting right up. It's going to be right up after this. Welcome into another edition of After Further Review. We are your hosts, Tye and Landon Pats. That's Tye. I'm Landon. How are you today, man?
I'm doing good. It's been a day.
It's been a day. It's a beautiful
week.
Thursday. We're having a good time at it, though. But hey, can we talk about last weekend?
It was such a week.
I want to banter with you and have all the fun we can have. Dude, we got to get right into games.
Yeah, we got to get straight to it.
There's too much to talk about in this last weekend. In case you're living under a rock, last weekend in college football was one of the most insane that lived up to the hype that it had beforehand. Mm-hmm. People were talking about this weekend for months before the college football season, seeing some of the big matchups that were planned for it, and we had an awesome slate.
There were some games we don't even have enough time to even put in there, so it was just a whole lot of games. But we can start off right now with LSU going up against Ole Miss.
Yeah. I think the biggest part about this game, it was insane at the end.
Straight nail biter.
Oh, it was awesome. LSU coming back on that long drive at the end there. Nussmeier making some throws at the end of the game that he wasn't expecting himself to make. Like, we were watching him for the rest of the game, and it was not pretty. Shows up in the end of the game, his basically last two throws of the game, 2 touchdowns to win the game.
LSU showed some resilience, but Ole Miss's offense still was not able to, show what they've been able to do with those non-conference games. And my only question is just, when is Lane Kiffin going to ever win a big game?
Here's my thing now. We talked about this a little bit last week. I don't know if it's going to be with Ole Miss.
I don't think so either.
I think he might be going to a bigger, better job in the SEC, which to me is very interesting because what has he shown to earn that job in a lot of ways? He's been a good offensive coordinator. He knows what he's doing with an offense. He has not proven that he can win at a high level in the SEC.
We've talked about it with other coaches, like even the NFL, like Sala and Cliff Kingsbury. They're just not known to be great head coaches. And so, you have to let Lane Kiffin in there just because of how great of a recruiter it is and then him being offense guru. But again, if you're not able to win a big game, I don't see how you can be a head coach.
And that's what's tough, especially at the highest level. Now, am I saying that he can't come to the Big 12 and come coach a team here to be the most successful team? Probably. I bet he would be the best coach in the Big 12 as soon as he walked in. But we're talking about the SEC, where there's really, really big hitters, and everybody's going to be a good recruiter, and everybody's going to have a good scheme. You're not going to run into a team that's just not figured it out entirely.
Especially because the SEC seems a lot more open than it is, even against the Big Ten. So there's a lot to go after this game, and it's just.
Speaking of which, on the wide open SEC, we got to talk about Bama. We got to talk about South Carolina. That was an awesome game.
It was.
That was what you love in college football.
It's something I would like to call for Alabama just a struggle win, because it was one of those things where, again, it's kind of like what I saw last year with Alabama. Whenever Jalen Milroe gets struggling, there's a lot of pressure. He doesn't live up to the Heisman expectations when it comes to it. Even when the offense clicks, it clicks, but it couldn't against that South Carolina defense. So, Jalen Milroe turning the ball over multiple times. It was just a sloppy way. And then even at the end when Damani Jackson, he almost kneeled it for the safety and would have led to overtime. It was just not good.
The team that I want to shout out for this game, South Carolina, Lenore Sellers looks like a guy that's going to be really good for them for a minute.
Yeah.
That team played with a lot of grit and a lot of fire, and I know that they had some bounces go their way. That onside kick at the end of the game
was a beautiful onside.
Oh, it was incredible too. But my thing about this that I saw in this is that South Carolina is starting to be able to really compete on certain levels. I think there's a couple teams that are getting really close to kind of evening the playing field. I think Kentucky's in this range. I think South Carolina's in this range. I'm not saying they're going to be on the same tier. But I'm thinking that they're elevating their programs enough, and this was just another spot in Beamer's resume at this point where it's saying you're getting close enough. Now, when is going to be the point when you start winning these games fully? I don't know, but we're going to have to find out and see.
The great thing about the SEC, what I've noticed, is that even though there's tiers of who's going to be the top guys and the lower ones, every team is still competing, and it's just still been wide open.
Well, actually, except for one team.
Except for one team.
That would be, I can't remember who they are. They're pretty irrelevant. They only scored 3 points this last week. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oklahoma.
I'll give you that one.
That's crazy. It's almost like their offense was playing at a crutch and a handicap because they're playing the wrong quarterback. It's a crazy idea that they can't throw the ball downfield. They have no weapons available right now, and Texas played a mediocre game at best and won by 31.
I will say, the way how Quinn Ewers was playing, I wasn't really sure how he was going to be able to go And sorry, peace.
So
money.
we're getting a stare down from our audio technician who's a big OU fan.
he's a
But I
huge
stand by
OU
what I
fan.
said, Preston. I'm sorry.
I mean, Hawkins, he's a true freshman, so there wasn't really. There's so much he could have done. I thought the offensive play calling was horrible. Again, you're battling with so many injuries, especially with the likes of Farouk and Nick Anderson.
Absolutely.
There was not really much he can do, and Hawkins isn't the he doesn't have the talent right now where he can train and take this team all the way to the destined and to the promised land. So it's going to be a lot more for OU, and this is kind of what I expected. I know I said it'd be a lot closer, but still, just the fact that Texas was able to struggle with Quinn Ewers and still do a beatdown.
Here's the biggest point that I'm coming away from this game with: 34 carries for a total of, let's see here, 65 yards.
Yikes.
34 carries between Michael Hawkins and Javonte Barnes this weekend for 64 yards. That's atrocious, or 65 yards, excuse me. That's atrocious, and you have to figure that out before you start playing other teams. Texas is the best team in the country right now. I think we can agree on that.
I can agree
but
on
you're
that.
going to go in an SEC schedule where if you can't run the ball right now, you're going to lose a lot of games.
Yeah.
You have to figure out how to run the ball consistently, especially when that's the dynamic part of Michael Hawkins.
Because even the likes of an Alabama or a Tennessee, they still are relying on the passing game. Even when they don't, they're still able to run it.
Yeah.
That's the big difference right there between them and OU.
And I feel like they're just not good enough up front right now. They feel similar to our Cowboys here in OSU, where it's like, yes, you're a good offensive line on paper, but I don't see any movement in the run game. I'm not seeing people get pushed forward. I'm not seeing these things happen that they're supposed to happen.
I'm not seeing them go to the second level.
Exactly. So I'll be curious to see how they figure that one out and where they go from there, honestly. Because it's going to be a serious problem for the rest of the SEC.
For sure.
Can we turn to the game of the week?
Yeah.
The absolute best game that we saw so far. I would argue this year.
I would say too.
Ohio
it's pretty
State
close.
coming 1 point short of Oregon in Austin Stadium, the biggest home win for Oregon ever, and them rushing the field with no time left as Will Howard slid it out.
I think even a lot of people are saying that they should have not field rushed. I think that's a perfect way to do it. Just going into the Big Ten, everyone thought Ohio State was going to just slaughter them just because of the NIL. Even myself, I thought Ohio State was going to win this game, but Oregon being able to come back and do all this stuff, especially with Dylan Gabriel having a really great game, same with Jordan James. It was exactly what Oregon needed to do, and I think they are going to be they're a lot more dangerous than what it was at first shown when they were kind of struggling with the non-conference wins.
Yeah, I have to shout out to one of the people that worked with me at my internship, RK, over at DNVR, because he has the perfect take on this. Why are we against fun? Why are we as a college society against fun and people storming the field? People will get mad at Colorado, and I understand to some degree on that. They rushed the field against a bad Baylor team. Who is against fun right now and going to rush the field? Yes, these schools have to pay the money. We get that. As the college athletes, do we really care all that much? No. Not really. So
the students don't care
have
either.
the fun. Enjoy the time. Enjoy going to these games, especially when, again, I just said it's the biggest win in home history.
Especially when it's like Oregon and Colorado, like even Colorado against Baylor, like that was their first Big 12 win.
Yes.
At the time.
There are moments that matter in these teams' history.
Just because they don't beat like an Alabama or an Ole Miss or like a Texas, it doesn't mean like it's against the field rush. I mean, if it's a historical game and it's like something that really will matter in the program like years from on, like even though it doesn't seem like it now, like I still don't blame them for rushing.
What did you feel about the battle of old Big 12 quarterbacks?
It was something. I mean, it's something I would have never thought to see. I would have never expected Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel being a top with these top teams, but it was fun. I mean, Dylan Gabriel played great. Will Howard played great. I mean, I know they had some stuff here, and even though we talked bad about Ryan Day, I still think it was a pretty good game on his part. I know he couldn't close it, but it's something we'll have to think about when it comes to playoff time of him not winning games, and something we'll look back on. But right now, I think that was a very hard-fought game.
I think it might finally be the breakthrough point for Oregon to say, hey, we're actually national championship contenders, not just showing up in the playoff and playing well. We're actually here to play and win a natty. Because, I mean, watching this team, they are everything that I was just getting upset with before in the Red River game. We can throw the ball. We can throw it down the field. We can make big plays on the game. We can run the ball with some consistency. Jordan James, 23 carries, 115 yards, 1 touchdown, is great for that game.
Yeah.
And we have playmakers on defense. I know this was a 30-point game that they gave up on here, but Ohio State's a incredible offense, and to see different points in this game where they stepped up and stepped out, that's a huge sign for me that they can compete and for a national championship this year.
Couldn't agree more with you.
The final one that we're going to talk about here is one of the most ballistic and weird games I've seen in a long time.
Something I did not expect.
Purdue and Illinois going to overtime to finish the game 50-49, Illinois holding on to stay ranked. Luke Altmaier played really well, 379, 3 touchdowns. What do you think about this game?
Would you be crazy for me to say that none of these teams had turnovers?
It's insane.
Yeah,
I went back and looked, and it's insane.
I mean, Purdue had the offense going. Illinois was just, they had more talent, and even though it was kind of another struggle win when it comes to it, Luke Altmaier had a great 2-minute drive going into the overtime, and honestly, I think more of this, especially with Pat Bryant too, he had a good game. But really, I was more impressed with Purdue. And when you have Ryan Broen throwing 297 yards, you have David McCoby, 133 yards. You're going up against Oregon next week at Purdue, and it's a primetime game. I wouldn't be surprised if I see something close.
What's so weird about this is that Purdue has been terrible the rest of this year. They really have been. They're 1-5 on the season at this point. Their offense looked bad to start the season for a little while, and they've been slowly picking it up into this explosion of having 2 running backs averaging around 7 yards a carry or more, 100 yards plus, multiple touchdowns on the ground, multiple receiving touchdowns in there. Like, it's insane to see this turnaround in that. What worries me more is that it means that Illinois is fraudulent. I don't want to say that, but I'm curious. What do you think?
Honestly, yeah. I mean, it comes from the lines of just Illinois. They've not been in this situation before where they're used to winning and having great program wins. And so they're still going to get tested out when it comes to these small teams. And it's something, it's not the greatest look on the resume, but I think what comes is that they fought hard. They still kept going. They didn't give up at any moment. They didn't do anything stupid like turnovers. And you just was still able to go out and have a great game with the fans, especially because Champaign, Illinois, again, has seen a lot worse.
Oh, for sure. But hey, they're going to have that big test coming up at this point in next week's time, and we're going to have to preview that game. But before we get to that, we're going to have to take a quick break, and we'll see you on the other side.
Randy Foy.
Travis Taylor. I'm the general manager for the Hotel Indigo Tulsa Downtown. I have a real good understanding of the food scene in Tulsa, and I've loved to see the way it's evolved over the years, and I'm glad to be part of it.
My name's Kevin Kyle. I'm the executive chef. I started here, the idea was to do something local. Everything that we try to do has Oklahoma products.
Tulsa is a big oil boom when we were the oil capital in the early 1900s. How Route 66 put Tulsa on the map. And the menu around that was, well, what would an oil worker take out in their lunchbox? That's how Prospect kind of came from.
We never get crazy busy, so we can do a lot of different things with food. And we can do things like wine dinners and have local dinners. We have a private dining room that people can come.
I think being at the heart of the old Route 66 has kind of weighed into us getting a lot of different things brought in from different areas of the United States. When I taste something on our menu for the first time, the first thing I go is, yeah, that's Tulsa.
Pecans are staple to Oklahoma. In fact, many of our native pecans come from trees that are older than Oklahoma statehood.
My father's the one that got us started into the pecan picking. I was probably 10 or 12 years old, and we started off with one little mechanical picker that you pulled behind a four-wheeler. Then we'd go home at night and we'd clean them on a TV tray. I guess watching my dad work hard when we were young, and people started trusting him and getting more and more groves, we just kept growing.
Being a relatively new and fresh company, we get to sit in the same room with people who have been a part of the Oklahoma economy for decades.
It's opened a lot of doors. It's gave us quite a bit of exposure, and I think people, will take a small company like us a little more serious. We're just going to continue growing as long as our community lets us and our customers keep on buying, and we'll see where it takes us.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Back for segment 2. We had to speed up a little bit because we have a new sport that's coming into town. We need to talk a lot about it so we can get ourselves ready and you guys ready for that. But with that being said, segment 2, we're going to preview a little bit into next week of some of the big games that are coming up for that. And then we're looking at the NFL. We're looking a little bit in the past, mostly in the future. So let's go ahead and start looking at some of the big games this next weekend. The biggest one that I'm most interested in, I think there's a bigger game on the slate this weekend, but I think this is the most interesting one because in some ways, like I said to you, I think this could be an elimination game. Mm-hmm. Alabama versus Tennessee is going to be a really, really fun game. I am
so.
curious to see where you stand on this game and where you think the final score could end up.
Honestly, this is a lot more. I had a lot more confidence for Alabama against Georgia just because of how hot they were going into it. But Tennessee and Bama have both shown that they both can struggle against very competitive teams that are not looking to go into the playoff. And when they both get tested, I mean, Nico's passing game was shut down against Arkansas and Florida. Jalen Milroe with the run game, that got shut down by South Carolina, especially when they do a quarterback spy. It'll be really interesting to see who is able to make those big plays. Again, my go-to person to watch is going to be none other than Ryan Williams. I think he's going to be the wild factor when it comes to it. But without him, I think you got to look in this run game if you're Alabama. And for Tennessee side, I think you got to pass the ball a lot more because, I mean, Sampson can only do so much.
That was my X factor for this game is how well does Dylan Sampson play because, again, last week he was the only reason they won the game. Nico's had 2 stinkers back-to-back, and I'm happy to admit that right now. That's his first 2 big SEC games, especially when he's playing, I mean, a Florida team that's not that great, but the week before I can understand a little bit more. I think more than anything right now, this has to be the bounce-back week for him, or people are going to start doubting it. And it's going to start falling apart pretty quickly.
I think that goes for both teams, too.
Oh, 100%. I think the talent is there for both of these quarterbacks to be high-level first-round quarterback guys. Now it is time to actually go out and put it on the field because right now, here's what I'll ask you. Which quarterback in the Florida game versus Tennessee game was 11 for 15, 125, and a touchdown, and which quarterback was 16 for 26, 169, and a pick?
I'm going to assume 16 for 29 was Nico.
It was. The other one, 11 for 15, Graham Mertz, who didn't finish the game.
Because he tore his ACL.
Because he tore his ACL. Rest
Sad
up
for him.
easy, Graham. I know Florida fans are excited about that, though, because they could see DJ, who's looked very good to start the year.
He's looked really good. I mean, I know they were going with that 2 quarterback type personnel, but I think Turner was going to be the guy regardless. And so it'll be interesting to see how Florida's able to bounce back from
Who you
there.
got?
I got Bama. I mean, I think Bama right now, they have more leadership when it comes to it. I think Tennessee's a really great program and a really great team. Don't get me wrong on that. I just don't think it's their year yet, especially because Nico's still testing out the waters when it comes to the SEC and just how much the intensity just switches once it's a primetime game. I do think Tennessee's going to bring the game. They're going to bring their A game because it's at Tennessee. But I think Alabama's going to close it out, honestly. I think it's going to be Alabama 32, Tennessee 28.
I think that's the difference, and I think you said it right there. They're playing good old Rocky Top.
This again.
Rocky Top, Tennessee. Hey, I think that home field advantage is one of the best in the entire country.
Oh, no, it is.
I
That's
think
why.
that they're going to play ballistic there, and I think that they're going to get a win that is going to be very close, like you said. I kind of have your score flipped. I think the offense is going to show back up. I'm going to have them winning 35-30.
We'll see who's going to get the cigar after the game.
Yep, we'll see which one of the two is getting with that. Another ranked matchup that we have this weekend. Michigan going to Illinois. We just talked about a flawed Illinois team that gave up 49 points to Purdue, but Michigan is not scraping by any means in this sense. They cannot do anything other than run the ball right now, and that's not even that effective. So where do you see this game going?
Honestly, I think with the way is, what is it, Luke Allmeyer, he's just been really great at throwing the ball, and they've also been able to run it down their throats, especially with guys like John McCray, who had 3 tutties last week. And I just think when it comes to Michigan just not being able to pass the ball, and then when it comes to the defensive line, that's been pretty much the greatest strength when it comes to Illinois, that and their corners. So honestly, I'm gonna go with the Fighting Illini here. I think they're gonna go and beat Michigan.
Here's my question. They just had their bye week. So their work off after the Washington loss, they had a bye week for
Right.
Michigan, is what I'm saying. I need to figure out who they're starting at quarterback because they still have not decided who this is going to be. They put Tuttle back in the game against Washington, which makes no sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me.
If you want to be a running power team and you want to use that dynamic, just keep Alex Orji in the game to develop as a passer. Because right now we've proven what Tuttle can do. We know where his ceiling is. It's nowhere close to what they need. So right now, even with a flawed Illinois team, I at least know they can score. They can get points on the board, and they can move down the field quickly. I think the Michigan defense will make that a little bit more difficult, but I do have them winning right now. About, I would say 28-24. It'll still be a very good game. I think Illinois' home field advantage will be nice for the first time in a long time.
Especially because Illinois already got tested against Penn State, against the whiteout game, and they only lost by 14. And I think going down from them to Michigan, I think that's a lot better. So
This is true. I have my own concerns and worries about Penn State, but that's not for today. That's for another day because they're on a bye week, and they are undefeated. So how mad can you really be at them? Sure. Hey, I want to talk about this game a little bit because it is your ACC preview matchup at this point. Miami is going to Louisville. And it's not where we expected Louisville to be, but they're still a very good team. And if they pulled this game out, the ACC championship is still very much in reach for them. How do you see this game going?
I think Louisville's going to make some noise, and they're going to, honestly, I think they're going to go right off the gates and score a lot. It's just with the second half adjustments that Miami's able to do, that's the biggest difference maker. So I got Miami winning. I think it'll be a lot closer.
Yep.
But I don't think Louisville is going to be able to close it out, sadly, because they were my ACC pick. It's just the way I've been able to see it with these close games in the fourth quarter, they have just not been able to close out, and that's kind of the only thing I really worried about before picking the ACC.
I think more and more I should have stuck to my guns with Clemson. I think I was onto it.
I want them to be different.
I should have stepped. Well, here's my thing. Well, remember the week after that, and they lost that first game against Georgia. I was like, I'm out because their offense is still terrible.
That's how I look.
But again, they finally figured it out after week 2, and I was like, okay, why did it take you until 2 weeks into this season to finally figure out? Okay, what they're there, they're figuring it out.
Yeah.
All right, the big one. It's happening down in Austin. It's between the new SEC team, the new big bad boy in town, and the old big SEC team right now. Georgia is traveling to Texas. Who you got?
Man, I've been going back and forth this entire time because I think when it comes to Texas, I think Georgia and Bama are the only teams that can really be close to them. But it's at Austin. Texas is complete. They have their weapons. They have the defense. Carson Beck and them are still struggling. They had a struggle win against Mississippi State of all teams. Just going off of that, I really think Texas is going to be able to pull this out here. And honestly, for me to say that, because I've doubted Texas many times the past couple of years, I got them winning by 10, honestly.
I'm going to play the same rule I played with the OU game. It's just a different position now. Mm-hmm. Who's the best playmaker in this game?
Ooh. That's a tough one. It's either
Gunnar Helm, Ryan Wingo,
There's
Isaiah
a lot
Bonds.
of people. I really like Mingo, though.
Okay.
I really like Mingo.
So my point with this is I can name 3 to 4 guys that I would probably take over any of the Georgia playmakers. And we've known this. This has been established.
Especially with Isaiah Bond, too.
I think Texas has proven at this point that they can score enough points to hang and be around in these games.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be an outburst like they usually have, but I think with Quinn Ewers having a game underneath his belt now coming back, I have them scoring somewhere right around the 35-36 range. And I have them beating Georgia by right around 6 or 7.
I'll be interested to see because I don't think when it comes to that, I don't think it's going to be like Georgia versus Bama where Georgia just looks terrible that first half. I think they'll get the guns going. They know they can run the ball at least. It's just going to be who's going to be that playmaker for Georgia's wide receivers or their tight end even.
And I also worry a bit about their secondary because they were looking pretty shoddy against Mississippi State last week.
Yeah, they were looking
kind
of
up a lot
rough.
of points. Now, we got to move a little bit quickly here because we still got to get to our NFL stuff and our NFL picks in here. Yeah. We're using the 3 Ws this week as more of a look ahead than a look behind. We have a lot of good games this last weekend, but we feel like they're already in the past. We already know what's going on with that. So how do we feel about next week's games and where do we stand with that? If we can pull up Tye's 3W graphic on there.
My 3Ws,
see
it's going to go
how we're going with that.
My who is none other than Drake May. He had his first career start against the Houston Texans. It was not really that great, but when you have your first start, you have 3 touchdowns. It's a really great sight, and it's a lot of things that Patriots fans have been a lot more excited right now than
dang good throws.
Yeah. Speaking of that, because of that, Aaron Rodgers had to call his boy and had to get Devontae Adams in there.
Not what he's worried about, but yeah.
I think he'd be worried. I mean, the way Drake May was playing.
We'll see him in 3 years.
And then for my where, it's none other than the Lions versus Vikings. This is going to be just a great divisional game. If Vikings offense is able to go hot, they could pull it off against Detroit, but just the way how Detroit's offense has been clicking and just with the run game, it'll be really interesting to see. I'm just surprised it's not a primetime game. But
they can't flex it this early in the season. Once we get past like week 8, they can start doing that. But I think Drake May looked really good. I think he made some really impressive throws in that game.
I think just the way
they're gonna have to reel him in a little bit. But
for sure, I think it was just the fact that New England Patriots offensive line, the starting line has changed 5 times.
Oh, they're bad.
The weeks, and then half the defense has been arrested with Jabril Peppers and now Christian Barmore. There's a whole lot of other problems, especially with how Jalen Polk, he's not really producing much as many people expected. So with all of that, I mean, Drake May did all he could, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that more than anything, it's getting him the reps. It's the balance between do we want to let him go get killed by this terrible offensive line or do we want to let him get experience out there? I think that they definitely need to draft offensive line next year. I think they need to build around him a little bit more, but the flashes are certainly there for him. And then the A-Rod Devontae one, do you think this is 2 years too late? I feel like we have seen the greatness of Devontae and Aaron pass at this point, and they are older shells of themselves. Not in the sense of a shell that they're not good anymore, but it's very obvious that they're no longer the same two players that they were when they were together.
I think production-wise, it's not going to be the same when it comes to Green Bay and that Matt LaFleur offense, but you can't say that Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams is not as bad. It's a lot better than what it was, because now you can move Garrett Wilson wherever you want. He's not going to be double covered like he was, and he's not going to be cornered by the number one corners. You also have now as Alan Lazard as a deep threat, as a third option, and you have many other players now that are going to be a lot better roles because they're not known for being the number 2s and 3s, but when they're able, they can't be the 1s and 2s, but when they're 2s and 3s, they're a lot better.
I'm going to be very curious to see how it works out, especially with a new head coach and how many people can actually get blamed for the Jets job outside of Aaron Rodgers.
For sure.
So we need to get quickly through my 3 W's on through here. You took one of the receivers that was traded. I took the other one. Amari Cooper is headed to the Bills. Can we throw that graphic up there, please? Thank you so much. Beautiful graphic, too, if I do say myself. I made it. Amari Cooper headed to the Bills, catching a pass from Josh Allen now over there, as you can see. I think that's going to be a great pairing for a lot of the same reasons you just said about Devontae there. I think the Steelers right now are a conversation to be had. Why is Russell Wilson your starter next week?
That I really
What is your
don't
plan
know.
with that? And I think probably my game of the week that I'm really excited for, I am very excited for Lions versus Vikings, don't get me wrong. The Ravens traveling down to Tampa Bay to take on that red-hot Buccaneers team with Baker Mayfield playing as an MVP candidate. I said it, MVP candidate. I think these are the two guys right now that have a real chance at it. Preston, again, our OU relative person here is going ballistic in the audio room. Shout out him. I think this could genuinely be a spot to say who's taken over the MVP, because it's been two of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I think it'll be very, very, very interesting to see where it goes.
This is our true test, I think, for Tampa Bay, because it's going to be, are they actually an NFC contender, or are they just an NFC division contender when it comes to it? If they're going to be able to take out a very good AFC team right here, I think that's a lot of great signs, especially when it comes to playoff time. And I think if any other team was able to make I would say upset here, just of how great and dominant the Ravens have been, it would be Baker Mayfield out of all these guys.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really great game. I think the biggest thing that I put on for the Steelers in there is that they're finally winning. They look good. They have their franchise guy possibly, and you're starting Russell Wilson. Did you not watch? I am a Broncos fan. I was forced to watch week after week after week as the dude sucked, and he could not make throws anymore, and he was the problem with the offense in a lot of positions. And we continuously said, no, it's not him. We'll bring in better offensive linemen. We'll do this, we'll do that. He continued to suck with a new offensive coordinator that we're seeing succeed with a rookie or quarterback. I mean, he's not good. Get over it. Be done with the Russell Wilson experiment.
I think hindsight 2020, we all know Justin Fields is the guy and for Pittsburgh, but when it comes to Russell Wilson, Justin Fields has been fumbling the ball a little bit too much, and I know that comes with the center and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it kind of sparks where Russell Wilson will play in this, because maybe he can have a better drive when it's the offense. But I think the way I see it is Russell Wilson's going to struggle these next couple of weeks if he's going to be the starter, and Justin Fields is going to be a lot better.
And you lost such a big dynamic to your offense. You just had the ability to run really well with Najee and with him in the same backfield, and you've lost that.
Especially because they were 4-2.
Yes. All right. I digress. We'll see Russell Wilson suck this weekend, and I'll come in here and say I told you so. But when we get back on the other side of this, we're going to be talking about the NBA. Basketball is back, baby, and it's back in 4 days. So we need to get down to breaking down the Eastern Conference this week, baby. And we'll do it right after this.
Jalen Hands.
In the charming town of Stillwater, there is a hidden gem of a restaurant called Freddie Paul's. The man behind this culinary wonderland is the passionate and talented owner Brian Saliba. Brian Saliba, a talented chef and entrepreneur, had always dreamt of creating a dining experience that transcended the ordinary. Freddie Paul's is more than just a restaurant, it's a culinary adventure. The restaurant has something for everyone, from succulent steaks and mouth-watering burgers to delectable vegetarian dishes. Freddie Paul's continues to thrive as a restaurant and a symbol of the love and passion that goes into every dish. As the years passed, Freddie Paul's remains a culinary beacon in Stillwater, thanks to Brian's unwavering commitment to his craft and the community that embraced him. It's a place where memories are made, flavors are celebrated, and the spirit of Oklahoma cuisine lives on, thanks to one man's dream that brought it to the world.
We would design something, it was set on the counter, and people was either, if enough of them said, you know, this isn't it, it never made to the line. Dad was excited that they're all original. They were all designed on Mom's kitchen table, and it gets in your blood after a while.
We're very happy that Pamela and Michael have taken over the business and kept the family going.
We took the business over in 2017. When we found that it was available, we wanted to keep the legacy of family alive, but it was also incredible products that deserved to be a part of Made in Oklahoma's story. We were a part of Made in Oklahoma years ago, and so it kind of grew as Made in Oklahoma grew.
Oklahoma is ingrained into our everything that we did. We've been here most of our life. That's what we entailed our whole business on, was the Oklahoma homegrown feeling.
Welcome back with the third segment, and we got to talk about the NBA. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I love NBA basketball. I love basketball in general. I think it's so much fun. Who doesn't like? If you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball. But I digress. We are going to start and go ahead and talk about the East. The Eastern Conference has been known as the weaker conference, of course. And I think this year is no different. I think there's a pretty distinct bottom tier of teams. I think there's a few teams that could make the play-in. I think there's a few teams that are in the playoffs. And I think there's those true contenders at the very top. And we spent this week debating about it, talking about it, figuring out who we wanted in what spots. So, if we could pull up that graphic real quick about just the bottom half of them. Perfect. There we go. We have, on the very bottom row, our non-playoff teams or play-in teams. We have the Nets, self-explanatory. They are missing so many good players right now because of trading and just being a bad team and trying to be bad for this year. The Washington Wizards, who I don't see a whole lot of growth out of them at this point. The Atlanta Hawks, who just lost their second-best player for basically nothing and their first-round pick back. The Chicago Bulls, who lost DeMar DeRozan and that 20-point-per-game scorer, and the Charlotte Hornets, who we cannot consistently say will stay healthy enough with Mark Williams and LaMelo Ball. In the play-in section, we have the 4 teams in there, whatever order you'd like. It's why it's on a tier. Miami Heat, Toronto Raptors, Detroit Pistons, and the Indiana Pacers. We feel like finally this is the year that Detroit makes it through, and this was probably the biggest debate we had the entire week.
Debate, because honestly, my two teams when I was thinking about this was the Detroit Pistons and Chicago Bulls.
Yep.
I think when it comes to Chicago Bulls, I think they got a lot of great playmakers in Giddey, and then you have the return of Lonzo Ball. It's just, I think it's kind of a little too late, especially when they got Zach LaVine, Vucevic. I don't think Vucevic is going to be that guy.
You need people to score.
You need a lot of people to score right here. You have all the defenders and playmakers. You just don't have that scorer. I know Zach LaVine's going to be that guy, but...
Yeah, but see, they don't even have the defense. That's the thing. Other two. You're starting Nikola Vucevic in the year 2024, 2025.
Yeah,
that's bad. And the fact that they don't have any down-low presence, and I'm not 100% sure on any of their guards, Zach LaVine's been pretty iffy these last couple of years, makes me feel... I like Kobe White. I think he could be a good scoring guard. I just worry about the long-term consistency of the team and what they're going to add to it, especially when losing DeMar DeRozan, who, even at his old age, was super, super productive for them.
I think for them, for even to want to be a play-in or playoff team, they're going to need a lot from their depth. I think like with Ayo Dosunmu, Torrey Craig, Jalen Smith even, he can be someone, but you're going to have to ask a lot from these bench rotation guys. And it's going to be a point of a time when we start thinking, when's Vucevic going to be gone, or when's Zach LaVine going to request for a trade?
I mean, Zach LaVine's already requested a trade about 4 times. They just don't let him leave because they don't want to. I think the biggest thing right now that we can look at with the East, that one of the teams I'm most interested in, I want to kind of feel it out with you as well. The Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah.
I feel like they're due at some point to take this leap. They have LaMelo Ball. They have Brandon Miller, who I really like. I think Mark Williams is a capable, good center. They brought in a guy named Tidjane Salon from France this year, who's a long, lengthy guy. He's very raw. I don't know how good he's going to be right away. But they have the pieces that make you feel like, okay, in a weak Eastern Conference, you should be a play-in team. But I still can't consistently say that's going to happen. How do you feel about the Hornets?
I mean, it's kind of like what we've been seeing the past couple of years with Charlotte Hornets, except they got all the attention in media because of LaMelo Ball. I think Brandon Miller's going to have to take a big step if they're going to want to do a play-in team, especially when you have people like Miles Bridges. They do have Trey Mann, and I will give them that. It's just, I think when it comes to consistency and all that, LaMelo Ball is going to have to stay healthy. And if that's the case, you're not going to have him back-to-back games if you're going to be that star player. And so I think it's just going to be, they're going to make some noise, but it's not going to be they're not going to be able to do it for a full 82 games.
Yeah.
A team that I was kind of thinking about, it was the Atlanta Hawks. I think Trae Young, they have them as their star guy. He's their number one. It's something I'm really interested in to see how he's going to make the season. I just don't see a team, or I just don't see a chance of Trae Young being the only guy to get them to the play-in.
Yeah.
So
I don't mean this in any disrespectful way. I make a point when I say this. Who was the first overall pick this last year for the NBA?
shoot, man, I can't. I have been thinking about
His name was Zachary Reese-O'Shea.
Yeah.
Reese-O'Shea went to the Atlanta Hawks, and I think he's probably the most under-talked about first overall pick ever. And it's for good reason. I think the dude's ceiling is DeAndre Hunter, who they already have on roster. It was a bad draft class, I'll give you that, but I don't see the Hawks having. And again, my way of looking at this in a lot of ways is how are you going to replace production? You lost 20 points per game and about 5.5 assists a game with DeJounte Murray. How are you going to find somebody who's going to go out there and replace that production per night? So I'll be curious to see if young dudes like Kobe Buffkin can step up, the guy from Michigan last year, and a few other players on their team. I don't feel as high on them. If I had to put some people in order in that last bottom tier, I'm saying the Nets are the worst team because they're obviously trying to be the worst and they're going to sell off the most pieces they have. I'd say the Wizards are pretty set in where they are if they're starting with Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma and Alex Sarr right now. I think Sarr could be a really good player. I think the rest of them are kind of up in the air. I don't really want them on my team. For me, I'd put the Hawks there, and then I'd put the Bulls, and then I'd put the Hornets.
It's kind of weird because the NBA is kind of evolved where rookies used to be like starting first game or whatever, and now we've kind of shifted to where we're putting rookies into the G League now and making sure they're fully developed. And especially with this weak draft class, it's kind of a lot harder to build off the draft, honestly.
I think that's the right way to do it, though. I think if we look at any other league where a young dude comes in there and they have to earn their reps and they have to earn their stripes and they have to be in this. When an NFL rookie comes in, just because he's a first-round pick, some places will just automatically start him. Yeah. But you still are fighting for your job the whole way through.
For sure.
And you have to come back from it. I think the NBA for a long time was saying, we're setting up these young stars, we're setting up these people. I feel like making people earn it. And I still remember as a Nuggets fan watching Emmanuel Mudiay start 82 games for us and be horrendous. Yeah. And then I was having to go back and try again with Jamal Murray, where then we brought him off the bench and made him earn his minutes and made him get to the point of that. The G League
and like kind of like benching your rookies has just been a lot more.
Oh, for sure. And I also think there's a lot less guys right now that are ready to be in the NBA.
Yeah.
They're drafting people so young, and they're drafting these players that are not developed enough, but just based on the potential of it.
Yeah.
And so they're not ready to play NBA basketball yet, and they know that.
It'll be interesting. I mean, I loved how our most debates that came was just who was going to be in the play-in.
I know, and it's so ridiculous, especially when we're talking about the Detroit Pistons. But hey, new head coach. I think there's some stability in there. I think there's some professionalism in there. I think that they have the talent. How could you not after having this many top overall picks? Sure. Cade Cunningham's a great player and think I could take that all-star jump this year. Shout out the OSU Pokes. I know it's a little biased, but I still do think he is that type of player. Being a 6'8" point guard who can shoot off the dribble is a really, really hard person to find, especially when you pair it with Jaden Ivey, who is that athletic and that explosive and is looking like a playmaker right now.
And then you got some veterans like Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway. I mean, on paper, yes.
Jalen Duren being a really good center.
Yeah, on paper, the Detroit Pistons look like a play-in team. It's just, is Detroit going to Detroit?
And I'm really curious because they brought in a new head coach, but I think that they finally can take that step. I think a team that's going to be really interesting to watch this year is Toronto without Siakam for a full year.
For sure. I mean, they're a very gritty team and like they're able to, but when you lose a guy like Pascal Siakam and then you have the East that's the most competitive is the play-in spot because we already know who really the playoff teams and contenders are, like those 1 through 6 area. I just don't think they have really the edge when it comes to a team like the Pacers or the Toronto Raptors or Miami Heat. Like Miami, they all are like ready for the play-in and the playoff. But when it comes to a team like Toronto, they're just not there yet. I think they need to kind of get more picks, which they already have, and then they have their free agency, which they're looking like they get some more cap space in there.
Yeah,
it's just who's going to want to go to Toronto. Especially with how the East is.
The more I look at this team, the more I look at a lot of guys that I think could break out, but need to break out.
They need to break out. That's the thing.
The Scotty Barnes addition, Scotty Barnes, I think, could be that type of guy. I think RJ Barrett could look in some way of that. I think Emmanuel Quickley could do something like that. Mm-hmm. I think Grady Dick could do something like that. I think there's a lot of guys on this team that could make that jump and be that really high-level player. What concerns me is nobody has done it yet, and so who's going to fill those shoes and continue to
I don't see all of them breaking out.
No, and I think that you'd be a really good team if you had a Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley breakout, and that's it.
Yeah.
Because RJ Barrett was already a 19-point-per-game scorer on okay efficiency with great defense. If Grady breaks out and is a great shooter and scorer, then you have another guy to go along with that. I think their floor is a little bit low. I think their ceiling's a little bit low.
For sure.
But I think that they probably sit in there pretty comfortably, especially with some decent coaching up there.
Another team I was kind of thinking about, because I wasn't really sure if you put them in the playoff or you put them in the play-in, the Miami Heat.
They're in the play-in for me. There's a lot of questions about this team. Jimmy Butler needs to play enough games this year, and they need to be competitive out of the point of making the play-in. But what did they do to get a lot better? We're going to talk about some East teams later on here that added a lot of pieces and bolstered up their roster or brought in a good right head coach for them. What did Miami really do to make themselves better this year? They brought back Bam, they brought back Tyler Hero, and
they brought Alec Burks.
Yeah, they brought in Alec Burks, and they are hoping that their young guys develop some. So
Which
for me,
one
you
ends
can't
up
wait on
popping
that.
off.
And you can't wait on that though. You can't continuously say, all right, we're going to just keep drafting guys in the 30th range, and they're all going to work out, and we're going to have great role players. Especially when I feel like Jimmy might be taking a step back finally.
I mean, he kind of needs to. I mean, he's done so much for Miami, and like that bubble run when it came to the finals, that was the best version we ever saw of Jimmy McBuckets. And so when it comes to that, I just don't really see this team winning it out if they couldn't do it in 2020.
Yeah, and that was 4 years ago at this point, and the Nuggets championship was 2 years ago at this point when they played Miami. So we're getting to a point where Jimmy's starting to really burn himself out on this. We need to talk about the rest of these teams really quickly. I think Indiana's going to be really fun. I think they could be pushing for an actual playoff spot. I think they're probably on the higher echelon of the play-in teams. Yeah. I think they're going to be pretty dang good. And the final team that we have in there, there's so many debate between these four teams. I feel like if you had to rank them, where would you put them?
Honestly, I have Detroit Pistons like as the bottom, like the last play-in team when it comes to it. I think they're gonna squeak by. Other than that, I'd have the Pacers as the top play-in team, Miami Heat second, Toronto at 3, and then Detroit 4.
So if you had to look at it today, the Pacers would be the 7th seed, the Heat would be the 8th seed, Toronto would lose in that round, and the Pistons would lose in that round. I think that would be a pretty successful season for just about everybody too.
And the only thing I would really change would just be Detroit, Chicago. But it's a lot of questions there's more Chicago.
So much problem with Chicago.
There's a lot more questions than answers.
And I also think that if they have a young dude that pops off and plays well, that'll be great. But for once, I want to bounce and take a chance on the upside of Detroit and say, hey, you have all the pieces to do this. Now go do it.
Especially because
win games.
When it came to it, Monty Williams, he's a great team morale coach, but he's just not able to win those big games. I mean, he did some success with the Phoenix Suns, but that's also when you had a great Devin Booker, you had a good DeAndre Ayton, then you had CP3 in the mix. And then so when you're trying to go from that team to what Detroit Pistons had when they had a lot of questions and a lot more needs, it wasn't really a good look for Monty.
I can't believe they guaranteed that dude 7 years. What a clown of a contract.
And then fired him 1 year later.
And then they fired him and the GM 1 year later, which I think is also very hilarious to it. But if they got the right people in there, I'm saying this at this point. There's dysfunctional organizations that accrue stockpile pieces for a long time. The Lions are like this, right?
Yeah.
Where they're just bad, they're bad. They have good draft capital,
and then skyrocket.
Those players are good.
Yeah.
Those players were drafted in the places they were drafted for a reason. They just have to get and develop and be at that point. But on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about the actual big boys that we think are in the East. Maybe somebody surprises us. Maybe we should be wrong and somebody doesn't make the playoffs at all. But these are who we have as the top 6 teams, and we'll have it for you right after this.
Leonardo Barbosa.
Thank you for coming to Stay and Play Pet Resort. This is where we can board your pet at any time for your convenience and make them feel at home. We have 5 different kennels for your pet. We have luxury suites that come with TV, camera, fireplace, and the webcam is at your free. We have Kitty City where you can board your cat for multiple different prices. Stay and Play Pet Resort offers a free chauffeur service. If you go to Baker Animal Clinic, you can drop your pet off anywhere between 7:30 a.m. and no later than 8 a.m. Stay and Play Pet Resort offers a game day sports package. For $37, you can drop your dog off during the game day as early as 7:30 in the morning. Policy states you do not have to pick up your pet up until 1 hour after the game. At Stay and Play Pet Resort, we thrive to treat your best and give them the best at-home feeling.
I'm Kristen Hawkins. I went to Oklahoma State University here in Stillwater in 99 to 2004. I've always felt like Stillwater needed more family-friendly things to do, and we have opened up AR Workshop. We do everything from knitting blankets that can be done in a 3-hour class, and we create doormats and porch signs, the Christmas wreaths with our yarn that we use for the blankets. We also do, we just started a new project for gnomes, and we've done pumpkins during the fall. But our big thing that we do here are interior signs. Our designs are extremely unique too in our workshop. Customers come in, everything is here for them to do. They create everything. They can be as hands-on as they want. They came in here to relax and have fun, and that they are proud of their project that they've made.
Welcome back. Final quarter. Final quarter. Yeah, geez Louise, I can't speak. We're almost to the end here. I'll get through it. We got our final 6 teams that we think are the actual big boys. We separated them into 2 tiers. I think that there's a pretty distinct difference between the top 2 and everybody else. But if we could throw that final graphic up there and show who we have in our set of tiers there. We have Cleveland, Orlando, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia being actual playoff teams and being in the mix there. Now, our true contenders that we saw in the East are the Boston Celtics, the reigning defending NBA champions, and the New York Knicks. Now, a lot of teams added a lot this offseason to make themselves better and be in a better spot this year. But one team that I want to start with right now is a team that didn't add a whole lot, but we're starting to feel a little bit better about them as they get extensions out, and that's Cleveland Cavaliers.
Right. I mean, honestly, they have all the talent and people they need. They just need to be able to close it all in. And when you got a guy like Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell, Max Strus, Evan Mobley, on paper it looks really good. They just need to be able to finally figure out that offense, especially when you got, I mean, Karis LeVert's also got one. Dean Wade, he showed some flashes. They have the depth and they have the talent. It's just finally putting it all together and get the offense ready.
The X factor of this team is Darius Garland, and I will stand by that by the fact of exactly what you just said. They have to be able to facilitate the offense with all of the great pieces that they have. There's 2 pieces actually that I think are the biggest breakdowns for this team. Evan Mobley's ability to shoot this year, because they have to be able to spread the floor with a big man already in the middle. And number 2 is if Darius Garland can run the offense and be the piece for them that actually dictates where the offense is going. I love Donovan Mitchell, and I love how he gets his own shot, but you have to be more consistently able to get into a rhythm offense and make plays off the dribble and do other things to score.
Especially because one of these guys is going to have to be the number 1 guy. I mean, we saw it with Garland and Sexton. That didn't really go well, and they had to ship off Sexton to Utah. And then so when you have 2 star players like Garland and Mitchell, it needs to work out, and they have to be able to share the ball a lot more. Like you said with Evan Mobley, he's got to be able to space the perimeter more. And then other than that, I mean, you have the depth and you have everything you need. You even got guys like Isaac Okoro. And so it'll be interesting to see when it comes to Cleveland. There's still some questions, but I think they're in a lot better spot.
Some people will ask the question and say one of the 4 needs to go because they don't work. Because they're 2 big men, and so a lot of people will argue that Evan Mobley would be best at center, and they're 2 point guards. Donovan Mitchell could play well at point guard. Who out of those 4, if you needed to make a change, would you trade?
I mean, I really like Jared Allen. I like his presence, but I think just the way how the offense goes and they're able to shoot and all that, I think you can get away with getting rid of Jared Allen.
And moving Evan Mobley to the 5, because I think he'd be an unreal defensive 5.
If he's able to shoot and he's able to have a good defensive 5, you can easily put someone in that power forward spot.
I think if there wasn't a guy named Victor Wembanyama that existed, I think Mobley at the center could be a pretty lethal defensive player of the year type candidate. But moving on from them, a team that I think some people are surprised to see in here but shouldn't be at this point, the Orlando Magic. As a true playoff team, they added Kentavious Caldwell-Pope this offseason from my Denver Nuggets, which is very sad, but best to you, KCP. I love Paulo and Franz. I think the 2 of them are only going to get better, and I think there's a legitimate chance that they could both be all-stars this year.
Me too. I think they'll be able to show that, and they'll be a lot better than – and they'll start right off the gates hot just because of all the momentum they had in the playoffs, and they know that they were able to be in the playoffs, and they deserve it. It's just on paper, this doesn't look like a team that's able to climb to that next level of actually being a contender. But I think with a one-off season and one draft, I think they can really get a star player next year, especially with how bad of a rep Orlando got, just even though it's a big market. I think just for them to be able to make noise through the regular season and plus in the playoffs and make some noise, maybe pull off an upset, I would say, against these big teams. I could see them next year really getting in that contender spot, maybe 1 to 2 years, but I agree with you with Orlando.
One of my favorite players to watch on this team last year was Jalen Suggs. Guy out of Gonzaga from a couple years ago, very highly touted. He's redefined his game in a lot of ways. He's averaging about 12.5 points a game right now, right around 3.5 assists. He's not really a true point guard anymore, but what he is phenomenal at is defense. That dude can lock up. And so having him and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in the same backcourt,
And even
along
Jonathan
with,
Isaac.
exactly, along with Jonathan Isaac and some of these other guys on your back line, I think they're going to be a really good defensive team. And that was kind of their identity last year. It's the question of now who's going to be your top level scorers. And I think that Paulo, Franz, a little bit of help from KCP, a little bit of help from the bench in certain spots. You hope that a couple of guys take steps this year, and the guys that you drafted who were young to try and help out with that idea. But I'll be curious to see where they go from here. An Anthony Black type or a what was the shooter's name from Michigan that they drafted last year that I can't remember the name of right now?
Yeah,
I'll figure it out here in a
couldn't
minute.
think about
But
it either.
while we're thinking on the topic, we got to talk about another team that did shake up the tree a lot more than the other teams did. Philadelphia brought in Paul George from Los Angeles on a big-time contract. What say you on the new Big Three in Philadelphia?
I mean, I really like on paper Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid. My only problem is just Joel Embiid's already said he's not going to plan on playing back-to-back games just so he can stay healthy for the playoffs. Paul George is the same way when it comes to it because he's already going to come into the season hurt. And so I think they're going to rely a lot on Tyrese Maxey in the regular season. And then when you got guys like Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre, you have Kyle Lowry on the bench. I think you have enough to get yourself in the playoffs. It's just how's the team chemistry and the offense going to run when you have Joel Embiid and Paul George in the playoffs, considering they're not going to play much in the regular season.
It was Jet Howard was the name of the guy I was trying to
Howard.
think of, and
Gotcha.
he will play well. Here's my thing with Philadelphia. I don't believe in it until I see it.
That's exactly what
I
was thinking.
think the fact, and this is a lot to me, having to be a Nuggets fan and listening to the debate of centers for the last 8 years, 9 years, Joel Embiid does not show up. He showed up finally this last year, and his biggest issue was, guess what? Health. So if we're going to talk about him sitting out back-to-back games, or he's going to avoid certain injury spots or whatever else, same thing with Paul George. I've seen this song and dance enough times. I'm not buying it. You'll be a 5 seed or a 4 seed or a 3 seed. You're going to lose probably in the first or second round, and you're going to be in the offseason saying, what happened? What's wrong with this team? We don't know what's the problem here. Bring in another player, and he'll be the new scapegoat outside of Joel Embiid.
Well, because on paper, like, this should be a contending team.
On paper, they should have been contending for Eastern Conference Finals and championships for the last, 8 years.
The difference is it's just these guys, they don't like to play their back-to-backs. I mean, I get it. 82 games is a lot season, but when you have teams, especially in the lower seed, kind of like in Indiana, that are able to play all 82 games or even like the 75 that was recommended to get an award, they are able to have a lot better offense in the playoffs just because they have everything and they've done everything right in the regular season. Yeah. But when you have Embiid and Paul George, you're not really sure how the chemistry is or the flow is because one's playing, one's not, and all that. It's a lot more difficult.
It's the
in
same
the
thing we
playoffs.
saw with the Clippers.
Especially when it goes schematically into the playoffs, the game goes short. It goes a lot longer. It's a lot less scoring. It's a lot more issues when it comes to it, more than just injuries.
I think the biggest thing that I will never get with Philly is they have been this paper on team for years, and what I have always said that they truly, truly need is a good playmaking point guard.
Yeah.
Not a Ben Simmons. I like Tyrese Maxey, but that's not what they need. They need a facilitating point guard to run their offense.
They got that with Kyle Lowry.
He's 39, dude. Like, he was running the tracks dead last year. I just think that, yes, they're going to be a good regular season team. Yes, they have the talent. But have we not watched the Clippers for the last 10 years and how we're just going to wait until the playoffs and see what happens goes? Have we not watched the Sixers for the last 8 to 9 years and seen how, if he's not healthy during the regular season and then he all of a sudden has a small injury in the playoffs? Like, I know how this song and dance goes at this point.
We've seen it too many times.
They're going to be a good regular season team. They're not going to survive in the playoffs, so we'll talk about that later.
Especially when you have Kelly Oubre as your starting shooting guard. That I really don't like.
Yep. Final team in this category is the Bucks. Do we expect a bounce back here from Damian Lillard?
I would hope so. I mean, I think just he was wanting a trade throughout that whole offseason. He finally got it kind of last second. Now he gets an offseason with Giannis. I think no matter what, you have Giannis on there, you're going to make noise. It's just how is it going to mesh with it?
Yeah.
And honestly, they're going to be in the playoffs. We know that without a fact. It's just who's going to be the guy when it comes to who's going to step up. Is it going to be Gary Trent Jr.? Is Brooke Lopez going to have another great year? Is it going to be DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince, or Bobby Portis? I mean, it's just how long are these guys able to finally show up and when they're going to be contained by other great NBA defense?
This is what I start to worry with this team is age.
Yep.
Damian Lillard is 34. Brooke Lopez is 36. Chris Middleton is 33 right now. Taurean Prince is 30. They have a lot of age on this team. They did pick up a great Gary Trent Jr. this offseason, who I think will be a good player for them. They're starting to really age around Giannis, and that concerns me in a lot of spots for them. I will still bet them to be a pretty high team in the East. I wouldn't be all that surprised if they're like the 5 or 6 seed this year.
Yeah.
Just take a step back, because what did we see from Dame last year that makes us feel comfortable about him this year and makes him feel like he's going to be a super high level player?
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot.
So as a guy who's 34 and had small ankle injuries before, I'm not going to bank on him being something significantly better. But out of pure respect for the freak that is Giannis, they will always be a playoff team. They will be fine based solely on him.
I think it's just going to have, age is going to have to play a factor in all this, but it's you're going to have to ask the question, if you can't get into that conference final, is someone going to have to leave out of this? Is it going to be Lillard? Is it going to be Middleton? Actually, out of all these three, who would you say would be the deciding factor on leaving?
On leaving, I think it would probably have to be Chris Middleton. I think at this point he's probably the most a shell of himself. Mm-hmm. So I think if you wanted to really upgrade and improve the roster based on the salary, it would be the Chris Middleton contract. But overall, I think that they may have one more run in them. I'm not going to count them out because I have seen them do it. But I would feel a lot more skittish about the Bucks this year than I usually would. Going through these power rankings, I know we're not talking about the West right now. I think this might be the most diverse difference in amount of wins per conference I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because these top 2 teams that we're about to talk about can hang, but I think just about everybody else is going to be in a pretty rough spot against the West, depending on how the schedules look. But top 2 teams, I think that there is a pretty distinct difference between 3 and 2 here. The real question is here, do you think there is a difference between the Knicks and the Celtics, and how big is that gap?
I think, honestly, New York, they had all the momentum, and they had great team chemistry when it came to it. They've always wanted a big guy to be their main guy. They wanted it to be Julius Randle at first, and then they were hoping it would be Mitchell Robinson. Now you have Karl-Anthony Towns in here. And I think when you pair them up well, especially a lot better than him and Rudy Gobert, you have OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson. You have all the guys you want. It's just, are they going to be able to all mesh well when it comes to it? I mean, I've been saying that a lot, but you have to ask these questions when it comes to every offense and every defense. And so, and also it's just, how's the bench going to be? Because you got guys like you have Mitchell Robinson, who's hurt. You have Precious. And then other than that, you have Miles McBride, and then Cameron Payne. I mean, you don't have a whole lot of bench
Deuce
depth.
McBride. I love me some Deuce McBride.
Me too. So you're going to have to ask a lot from that starting lineup, and especially with an 82-game season. Unfortunately, someone's going to go down, for a couple of weeks, and so it'll be interesting. And then the difference between them and Boston is just Boston, they won the championship. They have all their players back. They know what to do. It's just, are they going to be able to do it?
I think Boston will probably start off to a little bit slower pace just because Porzingis is out for a significant part of the start of the season.
Yeah.
But I do think that they're still going to be the same spot where they were before. I think what's going to be really interesting, and you kind of mentioned it, was the depth of New York.
Yeah.
Because if I talk about just the individual players, as Jalen Brunson's a top 5 point guard in the league right now. I would argue Mikal Bridges, if healthy and playing well, is a top 5 shooting guard in the league based on his defense alone. I think OG Anunoby is one of the best defenders in the league right now and can hit a 3-pointer. I think Karl-Anthony Towns, while he's not my favorite, is a top 10 big man.
Yeah.
Top 10 center, I should say, at this point, because he's not next to Rudy Gobert anymore in that stupid experiment.
That was stupid.
Built to only beat us, and it worked, and I hate it. But, anywho, I think the biggest thing with that is they need to be able to figure out exactly what the pecking order is with that. If I were to say right now, I'm thinking that Boston's going to be the best team in the East, and I don't know if it's going to be super, super close, but I do think that New York is a really, really good team who should be respected.
The only thing I have for New York against Boston is just the big men talent, because when you have guys like Al Horford and then Luke Cornett as your centers, I would rather have Karl-Anthony Towns in that situation. So,
but I will say real quick before we get out of here, shout out the Broncos. They're playing the Saints right now. But we got to wrap up the show for you guys. We'll be back next week with the Western Conference and everything that's going on with that. But thank you guys so much for listening. Please support on every platform that you're listening on. Like, subscribe, do whatever it takes on there. We'll get more and more people as we go.
Call your parents.
And hey, we're having a good time. Tell your mom you love her. And peace, guys.
See you guys.
And Aesthetics is Stillwater's premier medical spa, offering a wide range of services to help you look and feel your best. Our experienced team is led by Dr. Jessica and registered nurse Shelby. From facials to filler, Botox to laser treatments, we have the perfect solution for you. There's never been a better time to treat yourself. We have a special offer of 10% off all new clients when you mention this ad. Book your appointment today at pureskinstillwater.com to learn more.
Our state is one of the most beautiful and unique states in the USA. With diverse geographies, the historic Route 66, unforgettable restaurants, and some of the greatest people on the planet. With so much to see and so much to do, living in Oklahoma means one of the best vacation spots is right in our own backyard. Doesn't this story need to be told? As filmmakers and photographers based right here in Oklahoma, we thought so. And hey, who doesn't like a good road trip? So, we packed up our cameras, teamed up with Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell and the Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department, and that's how this series was born. We want to show you why traveling within the great state of Oklahoma is a great idea. So come join us for thousands of miles over the next year, from Broken Bow to Black Mesa. This is the Oklahoma Road Trip.